Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast, is for anyone interested in leadership and the wins, losses, and lessons of being an executive. We are two women who have successfully navigated C-Suite roles and are sharing our experiences. We will be bringing on guests to tell their stories and want to spark honest conversation and discussion, which may include swearing and lots of laughs. Join us on this adventure.
Welcome back to another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. Susan here, and I'm really excited about our guest today. I'll introduce him in just a minute. Charles DeSantis is a longtime friend of mine, and I admire so much about his career and his life, and we're going to get into it with him. But first, I want to say hello to my collaborator, Juliet. How are you today?
I'm great, Susan. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Feel a little oversubscribed, but
yes,
you know how that is.
We've discussed that we're both a little calendar challenged today. But we're glad to be here, and this is such an exciting guest. I can't wait to talk to him. But I do want to say something at the outset, and that is, I left my day job, I guess you call it, a month ago. Feels like a week ago. A month ago, and I had a list. I was going to get so much done. I was so excited about all this space I was going to have. And I am launching a business, so I am doing a lot of, networking and coffee and lunches and Zoom conversations. But I started feeling a little bit guilty about not hitting all the milestones that I was hoping to hit. And then I remembered a conversation that you and I had about my procrastination, which I used to beat myself up over. And I just, I had to go back to the conversation we had and say, oh, no, that's my process. And I know I will get everything done in the end. And I just have to kind of let it flow. And so it was a good moment of just realizing that, no, this will all work out in the end.
Yeah. There are two things in there, of course, that really land for me. One is the selfish one, which is, I was useful to you. Yay.
Yes, you were.
But that whole notion of thinking we should do things a certain way, and over time, you realize that even if you do things a certain way and you think you should do them another way, that you have confidence that you will achieve the goal that you've set for yourself. There's an interesting sort of notion of taking a step back, I think, from the should and saying, this is how it goes for me. I spend a lot of time background processing my situation. And then when I'm ready to go, I am so ready to go.
Exactly.
Which is what you call your procrastination period, right?
Right.
Doesn't mean things aren't.
I'm gathering data. I just haven't put the pen to paper yet.
Spoken like a true C-suite leader. Gathering data. All right. I think it might be time, on that note, to gather some data on our guest. Let me invite in Charles DeSantis. He jumps into action each day for three specific reasons: his family and friends, the community he lives and works in, and those in the greatest need. Charles is Georgetown University's Chief Benefits Officer and Associate Vice President for University Benefits and Wellness, which means he's actively creating a culture at Georgetown that supports the well-being of the university community. He's deeply engaged in the humanitarian sector, serving children and refugees in the greatest need worldwide. I want to call out one in particular. In 2008, Charles and a colleague from Georgetown started an art education program called Art in Kibera, serving AIDS-impacted orphans in a school in the Kibera slum of Nairobi, Kenya. He continues his engagement through the Kibera Art Institute, which has expanded the community from age 4 to 22 and has been recognized by the Republic of Kenya for its work. Charles has served and continues to serve on a number of boards in the humanitarian, community, and arts fields, and has been recognized with awards for his service. He was recently awarded the Presidential Lifetime Achievement Award for Service by President Biden. Since I've known Charles since the last millennium, I want to mention that he and his husband David have 4 children, Lucas, Andre, and the twins, Jasmine and Lily, biological siblings adopted from the foster care system in Washington, D.C. Charles brims with life and generosity, and he is a dear friend of mine, and he feels welcome in any room he's in, so hopefully he'll feel welcome here. We're really delighted to have him on today. Hi, Charles.
Hello. I'm excited to be here today. Thank you,
Excited to
Susan and
have you.
Juliet, to have me.
You know,
It's really wonderful.
I can't help myself. I want to start with the part about the kids, because Juliet and I were talking about that since she doesn't know you. I gave her a little bit of background. And she said, it's one thing to have 4 kids after going through the physical gestation or adopting one at a time. And you woke up one morning and you had a family.
I did.
Yeah. Kind of remarkable.
It's very interesting because I, my mom well, and after I had a former marriage, and I was, out in the market dating again and figuring out what was next in my life, she said, your clock is ticking. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't have a clock. She says, you do. She said, and if you don't start on this process, you will be old when the kids come. She said, you're going to date, you're going to, go through that process, you're going to buy a house, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, get on the journey and it'll weed out the people that you want, that want to be with you and you want to be with. And those that don't want this won't be there. And in that process, I started the process of going through the foster system training to be able to become a foster adoptive parent. And in that process, at the end of that, I met David. And 7 months later, I got a phone call about the boys. And he's like, oh, we got choices. I said, no, they're siblings. And I thought I was going to have 1 kid and on my own. And we adopted 2, and then 8 months later, 2 more came. So we went from 0 to 4 kids in 8 months. And it has been the most impactful aspect of my life. Yeah. And to be able to have, kids that don't fall far from the tree, as you had said to me before, and are just part of who you are and who they are. And you learn from them as more actually than you learn from yourself, from what they learn from you at times. That's pretty astounding to have these little humans that are part of your life. So
I just wanted to ask about the changing of priorities when that happened to you. So within a year's time, you went from 0 to 4, 2 to 6, however you want to describe it. And you had a career, you had all, this other life going on, and how that obviously shifted your priorities, but how you manage that and continue to manage that today.
That's a fantastic question to ask, because I've recently had to answer that, help somebody else get through that same process. And, there's a lot of stuff that we do every day that we believe people have expectations we should do and deliver, right? Mm-hmm. We've not been told or asked that, but we believe that there are certain things that people are expecting of us on a daily basis. And when I realized, all this stuff doesn't have to be folded up and put together every day. It's either you complete your work and leave to go and do what you need to do with the rest of your life, because work is not your life. Work is a part of your life. It'll be fine, because it's still going to be here, and you'll not leave a situation without completing the things that need to be done or leading the people in the directions that they need to be led to be able to support the mission of the work you're doing. You're not going to not do that as a leader. As particularly a senior leader who has wide scope responsibility for the impact of humans, right? You're always going to make sure that happens. But I didn't need my office to be clean, and I didn't need a report that I wrote to myself every day, and I didn't need all these little things to be wrapped up with a bow every day. Because at the end of the day, nobody knew I was doing that but me. And when I had to make choices between what I needed to do for me and what were greater priorities in that scenario, and that happens every day, I chose the sloppy office and the shit that needed to be done the next day, right? Over staying an extra hour and a half or 2 or 3 or whatever that looked like to clean up stuff in a very tight bow. And the irony is I was not good at practicing. I preached that before I practiced it, because I had people that reported to me, and I'm like, okay, you have this deadline. Who gave you that deadline, right? Why are you rushing towards that deadline? Nobody knows it needs to be done by then. You've artificially made that. And I'd walk away, and I would be like at work till 9 because there was things that I need to get done today.
Right.
And so that was powerful for me to make that shift wholesale.
Just so you know, I never trusted anybody who had a clean office.
Well, you would certainly trust me now.
Yeah, I was going to say all of us trust each other so much.
Oh yeah, it would be very high trust right now.
Yeah.
Charles, has that balance or that perspective shifted as your kids have gotten older? You said the twins are now 11.
They'll be 12 next week. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is when they were younger, and I was, I've been in my role I'm in my 19th year at Georgetown, and my role ostensibly is the same role, but it went from this to huge over these years. And what's interesting is when they were young and I was leading, we could manage them very differently because we controlled their scenarios, right? They at a certain time, they wore certain clothes. They went to certain things when you told them to, or when you took them, right? Now they have opinions. They wear what the hell they want. They eat when they're ready. They have sports. They have all these other things. So for me, I've had to learn to adjust as a leader to be what I would call multimobile or post-COVID transactional. That's what I call it. Yeah. Which is hard for me because I actually like showing up in an office every day. I actually like going to work. I don't technically work at home unless I really have to because this is my sanctuary. But now I sometimes have to sit in my car while I'm waiting to pick up Andre, or, I will bow out of a meeting. And, I think there's also something that this is probably a podcast on its own, but the difference between men and women caregivers and how they show up in the workplace. Women tell every woman that's worked for me that I've had to untrain told me everything that they were doing, and I didn't need to know that. Men say they're leaving at 3 because they have an appointment. When I go take my kid to soccer, I leave at 3:30, right? Yeah. People don't need to know where I'm going. I've made a lot of shifts.
Because I think one of the things that does happen when you go further up in the organization is you do have much more power over your schedule, over your commitments.
100%.
Some things are truly not negotiable. But I have noticed with my clients this sort of tentativeness in carving out just coaching sessions or time that they really want to take for something that will ultimately pay the company back.
Oh, 100%.
They feel like it's more them, and they're really uncomfortable with that. And as you say, my observation is that men, they don't fuss that part. They just say, I'm not here. I'm on.
They don't ask for permission.
They don't ask for permission.
They don't ask for permission. And so for me, I took it upon my own accord to continue to not ask for permission and just do things the way I needed to do it. I'm really into asking for forgiveness and have not really ever had to do that because, you're always you're in a relationship in the workplace. You're in a relationship with your employer. You give them something, they give you something, you balance it out. It's a dance. Sometimes it's a tango, sometimes it's a waltz, right? And for me, it's about honoring that relationship holistically. So when you are leaving at 3:30 and you have to leave a meeting at 20 minutes early, doesn't mean you're not a participant and you're not going to get right on when you get in the car, or you're not going to follow up with the things you needed to an hour later. You just have to be somewhere. It doesn't take away from your ability.
Yeah, I think having a really good team is important in that, so that your voice is still in the room, even when you're not in the room. Right. So they know, your team members and the people that are working with you on whatever project or whatever that meeting is pertaining to, understand where you would be coming from, even when you're not there. And I think that's key. For me, I struggled a lot with that transition from being a transactional employee to being a leader. And it's taken me a long time to own my calendar and say, this is my calendar and this is blocked off. And I think that's key to success.
Right. Well, I think the thing that I learned early about the calendar, which I really, really, really dislike, is open space doesn't mean I'm not working. Open space means I'm working on things that aren't engaged to talking to somebody or interacting with somebody. It's the fact that you have to have time to think and process and actually read and respond to things and whatnot. And I don't block time. I just don't make my calendar available to people. So, if you need to come to me or my assistant, that's how you end up getting on my calendar, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the days when I did have an assistant. I missed that aspect of working in an organization, but just because there's a blank space doesn't mean you can fill it, right? And I know that there are a lot of organizations that have moved to people seeing each other's calendars, and I thought to myself, I cannot cope with that. No, you can't just book yourself in and then we'll go from there. Never worked for me.
Yeah, we had a last organization, you could put in focus time and that would automatically decline meeting. But it was like this calendar management thing. And if I put on there that I had a coaching session or something that was for my own professional development, or I had to go to some soccer game or something like that, everybody was looking at that and seeing that, and they would feel free to move things around. And I don't like it. The transparency, there was too much transparency.
Transparency.
I agree.
I'd like to take you back, Charles, to something you said. I have two questions about your career trajectory, but this is one that you sort of prompted yourself, which is life after COVID. And I'm wondering how you have experienced your role in a world that is, like, you like to go to the office, in a world where not everybody goes to the office, that has this hybrid component to it. What have you gained, and what has been lost in the shift in the way your workplace has adjusted to the post-COVID world?
Well, being at Georgetown, it's a very prestigious academic institution that their pedagogy is delivered in person, but the structure around that is not necessarily in person. So we have three different modes: remote, hybrid, and in person. So my division, I'm part of HR. I'm, the deputy in HR and the chief benefits officer. And we have a hybrid environment. I have some people that for 11 plus years have worked in Minnesota, right? My deputy works in Minnesota and you would never know it, right? But I'm not that person. And COVID, I was so engaged with people, and I was the interim head of HR during the start of COVID. So I was so engaged, it didn't matter where I was at. It was all the time, all the business. It moved and moved and moved. Then when I started going back and I was an early return, I felt lonely, right? But people weren't back. And then when we did make a decision to have people come back in some format, the leadership that I'm part of decided we'd do hybrid, and that there would be 2 anchor days a week. And for me, I really love the interaction with people. And what I gained is the fact that I've become even more efficient with my time, because when you're alone, you have a lot of time. And a lot of that time can be inefficiently used, which I will admit I sometimes inefficiently use it. And sometimes I'm laser quick at it. So what I've had to do is I've had to step back as a leader in an institution at Georgetown and go, my division, I've 40 people in my division, and they are better humans with the flexibility and autonomy that hybrid provides them. I'm not necessarily good at that, right? For myself. But, if for the mission of Georgetown and their effective ability and efficiency to serve at a higher level comes through them having this flexibility, then as David says to me, my husband, he says, you get paid to deal with that shit, right? And he's right? So I, 2 days a week I'm there and people are there. And 3 days a week, they kind of sometimes salt and pepper sprinkle in, right? Just that the flavors around, but not a lot. And I've had to really learn for myself to not go inward, because what that does for an extrovert who I don't necessarily gain my power from other people. I do that in my own preservation mode, and then I bring it out in front of people. It makes you want to go in. And so what I've had to do is I've had to find a way on those days where I'm feeling lonely and lack productivity as a leader. And there's only one of me, right, that does what I do. So I have like 5 of me I get to talk to that do this in other divisions. It's just me. I push myself out to the university, and I go and I visit people, and I work in spaces I normally don't work in, and I make sure I invite people to lunch.
On that note, I'm popping in for a quick word. Hi, Susan here, and I'm really excited to share that I'm offering a group coaching program starting this October. The Meant for More Mastermind is a 4-month online group coaching program for senior leaders and executives age 45 plus who want, well, more for themselves from their roles, their careers, their lives. A mastermind, in case you're not familiar, is a type of group coaching experience which also emphasizes your connection to peers, senior leaders and executives who get it and who know what it's like to be in your shoes. The Meant for More Mastermind creates a dedicated space and opportunity for you and your peers to get individualized support and executive life coaching while you connect with each other so you can all grow and take action and be more of who you want to be at this time in your career. Isn't it time for you to feel successful on your terms and to be in charge of your authentic leadership? So if you're a senior leader or executive who knows or suspects that there's room for you to grow, I'd love for you to explore this opportunity. You can find a link to the program in the show notes, and I'd love to speak with you directly. So please reach out via the email in the show notes. And now back to the podcast episode in progress.
You know, I think about Georgetown being an old place to work, a place that's been around for a very long time and very prestigious. And I wonder, as a leader of wellness, that seems to be, I think, is that in your title?
It is, yeah. I founded our wellness programming there, yep.
Yeah, so thinking about how you navigate wellness programs with the old guard and the new guard, and we've been talking a lot about just different generations and managing expectations of different generations.
Well, you know, it's interesting because we have like 5 or 6 generations at Georgetown. You know, we all go all the way back to the silent era because faculty die in their offices, right? Literally. And we have the newest entrants, right? It's just what it is. And so you know, what's interesting is you never know who's clued in to the most modern way of engaging or not. You know, you can't underestimate the 78-year-old who's very engaged, because sometimes they're like, oh no, don't write me a check, just Venmo me. You're like, oh, okay, right? Do you have Zelle? Oh, okay. So, and then there's the 42-year-old who wants to be in person doing yoga, right? So, you know, what you do is you find kind of this happy medium where you program in a multilateral way. Like some of it's online. We're going to have in-person activities here. A lot of our wellness programming was tying the dots together that already existed at an institution like Georgetown. We have a hospital. We have, health coaches. We have faculty that are engaged. We have mindfulness is a core part of like the values in the Jesuit value world of, mindful thought and creating environments and spaces for that. So some of it's just telling people about it. Some of it is showing up. Like for 18 years on Thursdays at 12:30, I show up for a walk in Healy at Healy Circle that I've hosted since 2007 when I launched wellness. It's aspirational to think I can get people out there, right? Because sometimes it's all about walking your talk. I show up. Sometimes somebody's there. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes I invite a division and I have 25 people with me. Sometimes it's me walking the campus saying, I wish you had walked with me. Oh, are you going to join me on my walk today? Right. And so to me, it's about showing up and providing multi opportunities for people to engage, because right now there's no one way. There will never be one way again.
And the truth is, there never was only one way. Right. You were losing people because we weren't thinking about how do people respond to data. Are they visual thinkers? Are they, processors where they talk out loud to hear themselves think?
Well, it's knowing who you're engaging with too, right? For example, we have what I would call infrastructure, right? Our facilities, what I call the core people that make the institution happen, right? Like faculty and staff would be like twirling in the center of Healy Circle, or if in fact the facilities people didn't show up, right? It just would be horrific. For me to engage them, I need to go to them, right? They need me to show up for them. So the day we have, commencement, and I'm always processing in one of the graduations, I go at 8 a.m. and I see all the people that I know, and we take pictures together, and we embrace and talk about another great year, and you do that because you have to meet people on their journey. You have to meet them where they're at, and that's in everything we do. It's it sounds profoundly work-like. Oh, meet people where they're at. No, everywhere. When you're dealing with somebody at the market, and you're dealing with your spouse, and you're dealing with your kids, and you're dealing with your boss, you need to meet them where they're at. And you just hope that they reciprocate that. You hope that they meet you where you're at in the same relationship that you have with them. And I think that that's how you do programming, is you find ways to create a journey that people can show up. And I really love that people will call me at 2 p.m. on a Thursday and say, I couldn't make your walk. Could you be on campus in half an hour? Because my office is about a third of a mile, half a mile off campus, off the proper campus. And I'm like, I'll meet you at the corner of 37th and O, right? They just want to you just want to be connected. They want to be cared about. And you want to care. And you want to be cared about enough that they want to call you to have that relationship with you.
This whole line of discussion reminds me when Juliet was working in a construction company that had a large number of employees who were in the field. And the way to get company information to them and help them feel engaged and know what was going on was to go to the field. Mm-hmm. Yep. Like that was the only way that you could really ensure that at least you had some airtime with them, right? Because the other methods simply didn't work.
We have people in the facilities area that end up, we go and sit there every week and offer answers and just let them walk in and drop in and, have a computer, and it's just their work does not allow them that otherwise.
I think the facilities piece, I worked in a very complex nonprofit here in San Francisco, and the facilities, that building was old and disgusting. And, there was a lot of dark corners that you didn't want to go into, and they had to do that hard work. And that was something that was really important to me, that we recognize them and remember the folks who are doing the hard work to make your life a lot easier. And I think that's key, and something that leaders can forget when they get too far away from the people who are doing the day-to-day grind. And I think that's wonderful that you do that and offer that.
We didn't mention this. I didn't mention this in your introduction, but I happen to know, Charles, that you spent a portion of your early career in the private sector. Right. And now you are definitely in academia, which is a different kind of animal than private sector, but you also spend a lot of time dealing with the nonprofit space. So I'm wondering if you can share with us sort of a compare and contrast. Like, what is it like being in academia that is different than the private sector? I would imagine it's more like a nonprofit world than a private sector company, but just for us and our listeners, how would you characterize your experience across these sectors?
It's interesting because, academia is certainly nonprofit, right? And the variations of academia allow it to be more nonprofit or less nonprofit, right? We're kind of in the middle. I mean, we probably look like we're not nonprofit at all. And in fact, we're a nonprofit. I worry about the budget all the time. But, when I was in the private sector, and I'll use when I was at the Gap, right? I was the head of HR administration at the Gap. You transacted in relation to shareholder value. This is the number one thing you did. And you had to try to the best of your ability, balance that with how you impacted the employee to ensure that they delivered the service, the manufacturing, the whatever, to result in great shareholder value, right? In the academy, I was at Stanford first and now Georgetown for all this time. I've been in that sector now 25 years. You serve a mission that's part of a community that has a budget that you need to work in those constraints. And that requires a very, very specific and articulatable outcome for all the things you do, right? Like if the budget for benefits is $51 million and that's what you anticipate it being for fiscal 25, it can't come in at $57 million. It has to. And you know what's interesting is in this scenario, I look at people as stock, right? How do they perform? Were they really sick? If they were really sick, it's going to cost us more. If they weren't, it's not, right? It's, you know what you're going into. You just hope for the best and you hope trend and all those things allow it. Then there's this nonprofit world that I call it my paid and unpaid work, right? They're not different. They're equally engaging and they're equally hard, right? In that world, you have to so profoundly believe in what you're doing for those organizations that you're willing to ask everybody you know to provide contributions to make that mission work. And they are constantly revising how they deliver their missions, because if they don't, they'll sink. And so for me, you have stockholder value all the way over here to the left, where there's an engine that's supposed to make money a certain way and you have to be part of that engine. Then there's this middle mission-driven, very focused on outcomes, point of view that you have a certain envelope to stay within. And that envelope's not always even a guaranteed envelope. You start out with an envelope. Sometimes you end up with a business card, right? So, you have to stay within these parameters. And this other world is every day we believe so deeply in this mission that we're going to flog along and make sure at the end of the day, I use some of the places that I am part of, that people of color get to dance in the national scene, right? The Dance Theater of Harlem or the Washington School of Ballet or the Washington Ballet, these were the Star Art Center. Those are places where kids and adults are prospering, and they're prospering outside of the traditional norm of what a European art form would be or whatnot, right? So it all makes so much sense. It's so meaningful that, I laugh at how people give, because like I'll ask somebody to donate, will you sponsor this for $2,500? And then 4 months later, I'm sponsoring theirs for $1,500, right? So we're like swapping monies, right? And everybody does it, right? That's how those things move, right?
Yeah.
It's creating an economy for the greater good. And so they're different. The truest of the nonprofit world has some things that they really have to wrap up with, right? And deal with that others don't. And it's make or break.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I'm fascinated by your discussion of academia and the nonprofit and kind of what the rules are in a way, what the envelope, the budget window is. But I'm particularly interested in the for-profit shareholder value proposition, because from where I sit, that doesn't always serve the company, and it doesn't always serve the objective of the company. Mm-hmm. In other words, if it's just about stock price, people looking at the value of a company might only be looking at it through a very narrow lens. Whereas a company that is a robust provider of jobs, supports families, creates a community wherever they have a brick and mortar or a factory, those things typically don't show up on the bottom line and share price. But
they don't.
Hugely impactful.
They're the reason you follow a certain company and you shop and stand behind one. And I don't disagree with you. Like, having been at the Gap, they work very hard to holistically ensure that people throughout the world that create the products that they deliver are equitable, fair, and provide rights to all the people that are available to be able to do that. That's not seen in the bottom line.
Right.
But it is part of the calculus that gets to that bottom line, right? You have to make enough money to make sure that the benefits that people are getting and the way you pay them and the things you do to ensure that product works all comes out and works a certain way, right? So you're tweaking that engine every year, right? And there's certain things are you going to allow your company to not move forward because you are standing on worker rights a certain way? No. Are you going to give up worker rights? No. You're going to re-engineer that to do the best you can in this new scenario until you recover from whatever that looks like. Yeah. And I think that's constant, right? It's a constant churn, which is why it's hard on people.
Yeah, leadership for sissies.
I have a comment on that and then another question for you as we begin to wrap up. But I have worked in both the for-profit and nonprofit sector, and sometimes for-profit can be simpler. Because
100%.
When you go into the nonprofit sector, every board member has a different reason for being there. Every, employee has a different reason for being there. And in the for-profit sector, it's simple. We're here to make money for the shareholders. And I just always felt like it's complicated underneath that, but it helps sometimes because you do get mission creep, and nonprofits tend to, be shapeshifters a little bit. And so I think that it's an interesting perspective. We do have this podcast is called Secrets of the C-Suite, so I can't help but ask you, what is one or two secrets that you would like to share with our listeners about the C-Suite?
I don't know if this is necessarily a secret, but it's lonely being a C-level executive. You have nobody else that does what you do, and you have to really have intrinsic and deep relationships with people to be able to trust where you're going to go when you're in your hardest times. The other thing that I think is really important is you have to have a very large connection to self-care. I think that C-level executives do not do that well. And that's an early on thing, right? You need to gain those skills early on, and you need to continually develop them. And you will really need a place that's unconnected to who you are to go for mentorship. Having somebody outside of your norm to actually go to somebody and say, really, where am I at here? Right. Has been phenomenal in my career to have had that. Right. And I still have it, and I use it pretty regularly. And the other thing that I was taught when I was 37, right when I got to Georgetown, 38 years old, I had just started this work in Kenya, and a former mentor's spouse flew from Stanford to see me to say, I want you to know that you starting in a very high level role that could be your career, and ostensibly has been my career, right? She said, please find something equally important to you that's not at work. Because this may be your loving community and all the things that it's going to be, but it's also an employer. And there will be times where there will be employment and employer decisions that are made that will not feel like a community. And if you give it all to this and you don't have another place to rest and have a connection to, you will be hurt. And it will not be intentional. Find a place. And it was ironic because I had just started embarking on the work in Kenya, and it really resonated with me. And, so that's why I really think I have this, my career is not Georgetown. My career is Georgetown and all this work I do, right? It's holistic.
Yeah.
And so, because had it not been, I would be crazy right now, right? Because there are some things that have you're right. You're like, that wouldn't have gone the way I would have done it, or that's not how I agree with things. You have to have places where you don't own everything, but you can turn to the left and I can impact this. I can help these people. I can do things here well. That isn't innate because we're supposed to pour everything into our paid jobs, but we also choose the life we want to lead. And we have to accept the invitations into our life. We're invited into the life we lead. So that's hard to know though, because it's all about where you get paid.
Yeah.
So that's a hard one.
Our culture certainly reinforces that. I think I want to call out this aspect, this thing you're talking about. It's not only a richer, safer, more fulfilling life for you as you do it. At the end of your career, I have seen time and again people who go to retire or who are encouraged to retire from their employers, and you can just feel the terror because they don't know who they are unless they are that title, unless they have that job, unless they have that routine. It's not even about paycheck. Sometimes there's plenty of money saved or a pension coming in, but it's that identity that they go, who am I?
Right.
And I know who you are, Charles, regardless of the fact that Georgetown is your employer. That's why your bio, when I was introducing you, I really wanted to hit on the Cabrera thing, which is only one of many things that you do, is it fulfills you now, but it also enriches, it thickens your identity so that you have some more detachment, Juliet's favorite word, which I'm adopting, between you and the day-to-day experience of your work.
Agreed.
Yeah. And someday we're going to have a whole podcast on how you're balancing all of these things. And because it's really remarkable how you're able to make all this impact in all these different areas. Very impressive. And great to talk to you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I really, really appreciate this opportunity to be on this.
Thank you, Charles. So we're going to wrap now. I want to say thank you, Charles, so much for coming on. This has been so fun. We probably could have talked for another hour, but we shouldn't. So as we continue to evolve the podcast, we've already said to ourselves, there's a couple of guests that we're going to invite back at another season for some other conversation. And you would certainly be on that list. So
I would be honored.
Well, don't be too honored. We're asking the hard things. To our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll see you in another couple of weeks. Well, you won't see us, but you'll hear us in another couple of weeks. Thanks so much for listening. We're so glad you've joined us for this episode of Secrets of the C-Suite, the podcast. We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks. In the meantime, please tell your friends and coworkers about us, and be sure to follow, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed listening. Secrets of the C-Suite is produced by Juliet Clothier, Susan Sutherland, and Brian Clothier. Original music is by Brian Clothier, and the podcast is inspired by leaders like you.